Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. In tonight's episode, we dive into the heart of Osaka, Japan, where something strange and deeply unsettling happened just a few years ago. This story takes place in a fairly well-known hotel, one whose name begins with the letter T. Locals whisper things about it, and travelers who stay there often leave with an uneasy feeling. What exactly happened there? Let's just say it's the kind of experience that makes you think twice before staying alone in a hotel room again. Let's begin. Historia 1. It all happened in 2019. A Japanese musician, we'll call him Paul, was in Osaka for a short work trip. He wasn't a well-known celebrity or a famous face. He was more of an average artist, someone you might vaguely recognize on the street, maybe from a late-night music show or as an opening act at a small concert. He was one of those musicians still struggling to find fame. Paul was already familiar with that hotel. Every time he traveled to Osaka for work, he stayed there without fail. It wasn't luxurious, but it was practical. It was close to all his favorite restaurants and, most importantly, just a few steps away from the venue where he usually performed. On that particular trip, Paul didn't bother making a reservation in advance. He thought that, as always, he could just show up and get a room with no problem. But this time, things didn't go as planned. Upon arrival, the front desk staff politely informed him that the hotel was completely full. Paul didn't take it well. He had a bit of a reputation for being impulsive, and he showed it in that moment. He raised his voice, demanding to know if they had any idea who he was. "I'm pretty well known, practically a VIP guest here," he said, irritated. "I stay in this hotel every time I come to Osaka. You have to find me a room. Any room. I don't care which one, just get me a room." If you know anything about Japanese culture, you'll know that customer service is sacred. Even with difficult customers, the staff will do everything they can to help you, especially if you're a regular guest. And that's exactly what they did. The employees looked at the computer screen and exchanged glances with each other. Meanwhile, Paul stood there with his arms crossed, tapping his foot impatiently. After several minutes of quiet discussion, one of them looked up with a polite smile. "Sir, we've managed to resolve the issue. We found a room for you." Paul grabbed the key card, muttered something under his breath, and headed to the elevator. The room was small, smaller than what he was used to. But he didn't care. He just needed a place to sleep between rehearsals, meals, and the performance. However, as soon as he opened the door, he noticed it. A strong scent floated in the air. It wasn't perfume or cleaning products. It was incense, the kind used in religious ceremonies or funeral rituals. It wasn't overpowering, but it was persistent. It was soaked into the walls, lingering in the air. Paul frowned. That's odd, he thought, but he had said any room was fine. And to be fair, the staff had done what he asked, so he decided not to complain. He dropped off his luggage, got ready quickly, and headed back out. One of the reasons he always chose that hotel, besides the proximity to the concert venue, was the location. Just a few minutes' walk away was one of Osaka's most vibrant streets. Bars, restaurants, karaoke joints, pachinko parlors, you name it. All lit up with neon signs. The city buzzed even past midnight. Paul met up with some friends, had a late dinner, and drank well into the night. Around 2 a.m. he was satisfied, a bit tipsy, and more than ready to sleep. He said goodbye, threw his jacket over his shoulder, and walked back to the hotel. One of the perks of staying at his usual spot. But that night wouldn't be like the others. Back in his room, he didn't even wash his face. He kicked off his shoes, tossed his jacket on a chair, and collapsed into bed. His head was spinning, still slightly drunk, but mostly just exhausted. The moment his head hit the pillow, he groaned. He immediately sat up, confused. Did one of my friends follow me here? He wondered. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Outside stood a hotel staff member, dressed in a pristine uniform, hands clasped in front, standing still. Paul blinked. What the hell? Why would staff be looking for me at this hour? A few thoughts crossed his mind. Is there a problem with my payment? Did I forget to sign something? Or maybe it's a fan who wants an autograph or a photo. Then, as if reading his thoughts, the man spoke from the other side of the door. Excuse me, sir. Sorry to bother you at this hour. I'm from the front desk. May I come into your room? Paul frowned. That wasn't normal. He opened the door just a few inches. There he was, the staff member, immaculately dressed, standing upright, giving a small bow before speaking. Again, sorry for the disturbance, sir, but the guest before you left something very important in this room. May I come in quickly to retrieve it? Paul hesitated. The guy looked legit, but something about the situation didn't sit right. It was 2 a.m. No one had called to inform him beforehand. Still, since he had already opened the door, he nodded and asked him to make it quick. He wanted to sleep. The man didn't waste time. He entered and began searching quickly. Opened drawers, looked behind the curtains, even partially crawled under the bed. Paul just stood in the corner watching, irritated and confused. After a few minutes, the man stood up, bowed apologetically, and left. Paul was stunned. What's going on here? He thought. It was nearly 3 a.m., and hotel staff were entering his room at this hour to look for forgotten belongings. He lay back down, but just before closing his eyes, he opened them wide. No way. He rushed to the door and looked through the peephole again. The same guy, same uniform, same stiff posture. Sir, sorry. May I come in again to look for something the previous guest left behind? Paul opened the door, but before he could say a word, the man entered without waiting for permission and started searching again. Exactly the same as before. Under the bed, behind the curtains, every corner. Nothing. He bowed, apologized, and left. Paul slammed the door shut. Now he was furious. They're messing with me. That's the only explanation. He grabbed the phone and called the front desk, shouting, "Send someone up right now. I'm done with your stupid games." Minutes later, 3 staff members arrived. They all bowed deeply as Paul stepped into the hallway. "We're very sorry for the inconvenience, sir. How can we assist you?" Paul replied, his voice shaking with anger. "Assist me? Really? One of your coworkers has come into my room twice in the middle of the night, looking for something a previous guest supposedly left. The second time, he didn't even wait for me to answer. He just walked in. What kind of manners are those?" There was a long silence. One of the employees, a young man, slowly looked up and asked, "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, do you remember the color of the uniform? What color was the collar?" Paul was taken aback. The collar? Yes, it was green. The 3 exchanged glances. The young man pointed to his own collar. It was red. "Sir," he said cautiously, "we stopped using the uniforms with green collars over a year ago. They were changed last spring. None of our current staff wear that uniform anymore." Paul frowned. "What are you saying? That guy doesn't work here." Silence. "You're telling me some stranger entered my room twice, pretending to be staff? Because if that's true, you've got a serious security issue." None of the 3 wanted to confirm anything. They avoided eye contact, as if speaking the truth might awaken something unwanted. Finally, the young man spoke again in a low voice. "Sir, there was an incident in that room a few years ago." Paul squinted. The young man continued. "A guest claimed he had lost something valuable here. It caused a huge scene. Security was called and the blame fell on a young employee. It was his first job after graduating. The manager publicly humiliated him in front of the other staff and customers. That same night, he entered this room and took his own life." Paul was frozen. "Since then," the young man continued, "several guests have reported seeing exactly what you just described. That's why that room was closed off. We usually don't rent it out. Today is the anniversary of his death. This morning, some monks came to perform a purification ritual in the room. Paul didn't say a word. He stood still. The scent of incense. That's what he had smelled when he entered. Now it all made sense. Without another word, he grabbed his luggage, slung his bag over his shoulder, and left. He didn't even check out. He simply walked away, because no amount of nearby bars or music venues is worth spending another minute in that room. Sometimes when a hotel tells you there are no rooms available, don't insist. That last room that magically opened up for you might have been empty for a very good reason. Our second story also takes place in Osaka. Yugen, who wasn't originally from there, had recently moved to the city to start college. He grew up in another prefecture, and while his family didn't have much, they always did their best to support him. Every so often, they'd send him a little money, just enough to cover rent, groceries, and maybe a few school supplies. Nothing more. He wasn't living in poverty, but he didn't have any room to enjoy himself either. No nights out, no impulse buys on video games or clothes. Just enough to get by. One day, a friend told him something fairly obvious. Why don't you get a part-time job if you need extra cash? At first, Yugen wasn't too sure. He had just started college and wanted to focus fully on his studies. But the idea stuck in his mind. Yugen had always been passionate about fashion. He really liked it. And as much as he tried to dismiss the thought, the possibility of being able to afford a nice piece of clothing now and then was very tempting. Eventually, he started thinking that maybe working a couple of nights a week wouldn't be so bad after all. Well, but what kind of part-time job would be worth it? I need something flexible that won't mess with my classes, he asked his friend. That's when his friend leaned in a bit and said, "There's an app." Yugen raised an eyebrow. "It's kind of weird, but basically you rent yourself out as a boyfriend for a day." Apparently, most of the users were older women who paid to have the company of a younger guy. They'd take you to dinner, shopping, or just to hang out around the city. And the pay wasn't bad at all. "What happens afterward," his friend added, "is totally up to you. But honestly, most of the time it's just dinner and a few hours of chatting. Nothing sexual." It sounded strange, yes, but also kind of harmless. And for someone like Yugen, who was polite, calm, and had good fashion sense, it didn't seem like a bad idea. That same night back in his dorm, Yugen couldn't stop thinking about the app. How much money can you make doing something like that? He started researching. He joined forums and online communities where real users shared their experiences. And that's when things got interesting. One guy said he gave a client a shoulder massage, that's it, and walked away with 40,000 yen. That's nearly $400. Another one wrote that he got paid 17,000 yen just for going to dinner, and the meal was free. But what really grabbed Yugen's attention was one post where a woman offered this. If you spent 2 hours with her, just dinner and conversation, she'd let you choose anything you wanted to buy, up to 60,000 yen, almost $600, supposedly with no strings attached. It seemed too good to be true. And there were tons of similar posts. Some even claimed they made more. Yugen couldn't stop staring at the screen, wide-eyed. For a broke college student, this was like finding treasure. No heavy labor, no weird contracts. Just spend time with someone, be nice, listen, smile, and maybe give a massage if politely asked. But even that wasn't mandatory most of the time. And best of all, no commitments, no pressure, and definitely no sex. Just companionship, conversation, and free food. It sounded like the perfect job. By the end of the night, Yugen was already convinced. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? He thought. People had always told him he was good-looking. Sharp features, clean style, and a calm presence that drew others in. But he never imagined that would become his main source of income. A few weeks after signing up for the app, he was already getting plenty of bookings. 10,000 yen here, 15,000 yen there. And the money started adding up fast. With every successful session, Yugen felt more comfortable, more confident. He started reorganizing his schedule, taking more bookings when he could. The income was steady, the work was easy, and it became addictive. For the first time since arriving in Osaka, he felt like he was truly living. He ate well, dressed better, and even started saving money. Over time, Yugen got more selective. He had great ratings on the app, perfect manners, and now only accepted higher-paying offers. Until one night he received a message that made his eyes go wide. "I'm a single woman, nearly 60 years old. I'd love to hire you for 3 hours. I want you to come to my home and cook for me. After dinner, I'd like us to take a nap together. Don't worry, I'm nothing sexual. I'll pay you 300,000 yen if you agree." Yugen's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Sanzuman yen. Almost $3,000 for just 3 hours, he replied immediately. There was no address listed in the client's profile, so he asked, "Are you in Osaka?" She replied, "Yes." But after chatting a bit more, that turned out not to be entirely true. She lived about 2 hours outside the city. Pretty far, honestly. Still, for that kind of money, Yugen figured he could take the bullet train and even stay somewhere overnight if needed. He accepted the offer. That's when things started to feel strange. Instead of sending him a location, a pin, or even an address, the woman sent something unexpected. A photo. It was a hand-drawn map. Step-by-step directions from the nearest train station to her house, drawn in pencil on lined notebook paper. Who still makes hand-drawn maps nowadays? There were arrows, notes like "turn left at the stone lantern," "go right at this point," and even a warning that said, "If you reach the rice field, you've gone too far." Yugen stared at the map, confused. Why not just send me a Google Maps link, he thought. Maybe it was because she was older and didn't know how to use smartphones well. Weird, yes, but 300,000 yen was a strong motivator. He shrugged. She's probably just a harmless old lady, he told himself. What could go wrong? The next day, Yugen packed a small bag and set off. He took the train to the specified station, a rural place far from everything. When he arrived, he opened the map photo on his phone and began following the directions. At first, it felt kind of quaint, but after a while, it became tedious. Long, narrow, deserted paths. No stores, no people, just empty fields and scattered trees. He felt like he had been walking for hours. At one point, he muttered, "Where the hell is this house?" Just as he thought he might be lost, he spotted the final landmark from the map. A crooked wooden sign with faded letters exactly as drawn. He looked up, and there it was, behind a stone wall covered in ivy. A huge house, a mansion in the middle of nowhere. Yugen blinked, stunned. He didn't know what he had expected, but it definitely wasn't this. He approached the gate and rang the bell. Seconds later, the intercom buzzed. A woman's voice answered, soft and calm. "Hello. Hi, I'm Yugen," he said. There was a pause. "Ah, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you all day." Yugen hesitated. It didn't sound creepy exactly, but it was strange. Before he could reply, she continued, "Come in, just push the gate. It's not locked." He pushed gently. And yes, it opened without resistance. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. As Yugen approached the front door, it opened before he could even knock. Standing there was the woman. She had said she was nearly 60 years old, but seeing her in person, Yugen was surprised. She didn't look older than 45. She looked elegant, well-dressed, clearly someone who took good care of herself. She smiled warmly and stepped aside to let him in. "Welcome, please come in." The inside of the house was stunning, spacious, spotless, and completely silent. To the left, Yugen noticed what looked like a guest room, the bed perfectly made, sunlight pouring through wooden blinds. To the right, an enormous tatami room, wide open, everything arranged with almost ceremonial precision. It was the kind of house you only see in movies. "Wow," Yugen murmured as they walked further inside. "Your house is beautiful. Do you live here alone?" She nodded gently, smiling. "Yes." As they made their way to the kitchen, they passed another room to the left. Eugen slowed his steps, curious. How do wealthy people really live? He wondered. He peeked into the open hallway. It looked like a prayer room. The lights were dim, but inside there was an elaborate altar, delicately carved and polished until it shone, with a large statue of Buddha at the center. Used incense sticks rested in the holder, and golden ornaments framed the shelves. It was beautiful. This is on another level, he thought. But then something caught his attention. Right beneath the Buddha statue in the center of the altar, there was a framed photo. The longer he stared, the more pressure he felt in his chest. The person in the photo looked like him. Same hairstyle, same facial features, same expression. Eugen's heart skipped a beat. Is that me? He thought. No, it can't be. Just someone who looks similar, right? He tried to brush it off, but unease crept over him. Am I imagining this? Am I overthinking? But no matter how hard he tried to reason it out, that sinking feeling in his stomach wouldn't go away. Still, he couldn't show his discomfort. The woman was right there. He forced a smile as she cheerfully said, "Take a seat. I'll go get the grocery bags." Eugen nodded and sat on the couch, trying to look calm. He glanced around the living room. Everything was perfectly arranged like a showroom. But despite all the beauty, something felt off. Too quiet. Too still. A few minutes later, the woman returned with 2 large grocery bags and set everything on the kitchen counter. Then she smiled and said, "All right, we can start now." That was part of the agreement, after all. Eugen got up, shook off the weird feeling, and headed into the kitchen, trying to act normal, even though every fiber of his being was screaming otherwise. At that point, he had one thought. Cook the dinner, eat, get paid, and get out of there as fast as possible. He moved quickly through the utensils, focusing on chopping vegetables, boiling water, anything to keep his mind occupied. But behind him, he felt her presence. She was sitting silently on the living room couch, just a few feet away, watching him. She didn't speak, just stared. Eugen avoided turning around, but he could feel her. The intensity of her gaze followed him with every step. He forced a few polite smiles, but she didn't respond. She just sat there, hands folded on her lap, her face blank. During the whole dinner prep, Eugen couldn't stop thinking about that photo. It looked too much like him. It wasn't just a coincidence. The image, the angle, the way it was placed on that altar. When he finally served the food and brought it to the dining table, he couldn't hold it in any longer. She was still sitting there, smiling softly, and her composure gave him just enough courage to ask. Eugen sat down, took a deep breath, and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. I don't mean to be nosy, but I noticed something on the altar in that room. There was a photo that looked a lot like me. Is it me? Or maybe someone you know who just happens to look similar?" The woman went quiet for a moment. Her smile faded slightly, becoming more distant. Then with a calm tone, she replied, "That's my son." Eugen blinked. She continued, still calm, still gentle. "He was about your age when he passed away. It was an illness. I miss him terribly. I still do. One day I was browsing the app and saw your profile picture, and for a second it felt like I was seeing him again." She looked at him with a soft, sad warmth. "That's why I reached out. I wanted to share a meal, lie down for a while, and feel like I had my son with me again, just for a few hours." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry if that seems strange to you." For a moment, Eugen felt a wave of guilt. Maybe he had overreacted. Maybe she was just a grieving mother trying to reconnect with her son's memory. A sad story, a little odd, but understandable. Maybe I'm just being paranoid, he thought. But even as he tried to convince himself, something didn't sit right. The way she talked about her son's death. So calm, so restrained. And that smile. It wasn't comforting. It was hollow, slightly unsettling. Something was subtly wrong. After dinner, the woman stood up and smiled again. "Let me take care of the dishes," she said. "You can go relax for a bit." Eugen nodded and stayed on the couch, that discomfort still lodged deep in his chest. While she washed the dishes, he quietly pulled out his phone. He opened a website he'd heard about, a public registry that lists properties in Japan where deaths had occurred. All he needed was the address. He had seen it earlier on one of the shopping bags. He typed it in, and there it was. The house was listed. He tapped for the details. His eye scanned the screen and froze. Cause of death: mother with psychological history. Multiple homicide with kitchen knife. Declared unfit for trial. Not imprisoned. Still resides at the property. Eugen's stomach dropped. Now it all made sense. Why she didn't give him an address. Why she sent a hand-drawn map. She didn't want him to look anything up before arriving. He stood up immediately, heart pounding in his chest. He didn't say a word. He walked silently down the hallway, passed through the gate, and started walking back along the long empty path he had arrived on. He no longer cared about the money. Eugen never used that app again. Not after that. And from that day forward, he never ignored that uncomfortable feeling in his gut again.